At the party, my wife was ignoring me. Then her friend leaned in and whispered, "You're mine tonight." My wife instantly panicked. The promotion I'd been relentlessly pursuing for 8 months finally landed that Friday afternoon. Regional manager, a prime corner office, and a significant 30% pay bump. I drove home, fueled by an electric energy, desperate to share such incredible news with the person I loved most. I expected to find her in the kitchen or the living room, perhaps engrossed in a book, as was her usual Friday evening ritual. Instead, I heard the hum of her blow dryer upstairs and music drifting from our bedroom. "Hey, great news!" I called out, ascending the stairs and loosening my tie. She stood before the bathroom mirror, a curling iron in one hand, her phone in the other. A sleek black dress was laid out on the bed, beside a pair of heels I'd never seen. "I got the promotion," I announced, leaning against the doorframe. She gave me a fleeting glance in the mirror, maybe half a second. "That's nice. Can you grab my clutch from the closet?" "The silver one." "That's nice." 8 months of 60-hour weeks, skipped dinners, and endless weekend client calls. "That's nice." "Where are you headed?" I asked, remaining rooted to the spot. "Company party. I mentioned it last week." She set the curling iron down, finally turning to face me. "You clearly weren't listening." I certainly would have remembered her mentioning a work event, especially one demanding this level of preparation. The dress was new. The shoes were new. Even her makeup seemed different, more dramatic than usual. "So, what time do we need to leave?" I inquired. "We." She picked up her phone and began typing. "It's not really your scene. Besides, you always hate these work things." I'd attended precisely 2 of her company functions in 3 years. Both times, she'd spent the entire night deep in conversation with colleagues, while I made polite, small talk with strangers. But I'd never said I hated them. "Actually, I think it might be fun," I said, "especially tonight." She sighed, looking at me as if I'd suggested we hitchhike to Vegas. "Fine, but wear the navy suit. And don't be weird." "Don't be weird." There was something about her tone that resonated with me as I got ready, as if I were some awkward relative she was forced to chaperone. The party was held at an upscale hotel downtown. Cocktails, live jazz, the kind of networking event where everyone clutches their drink at chest height and laughs a little too loudly at mediocre jokes. In the first hour, she introduced me to exactly 3 people. "This is my husband," she'd say, then immediately pivot to work-related chatter that completely excluded me. I watched her expertly navigate the room, touching arms, chuckling at stories I couldn't hear, taking selfies with colleagues. I found myself standing alone near the bar, observing my wife of 4 years acting like a completely different person. Confident, flirtatious, magnetic. All the energy I once believed was reserved solely for me, now freely distributed to anyone in a business suit. "You look like you need another drink," a voice remarked from behind me. I turned to see a blonde woman in a red dress, likely in her mid-30s, with a smile that hinted she found my situation amusing. "Actually, I'm good," I replied, raising my still full glass. "I'm Jessica. I work with your wife in marketing." She stepped closer, close enough for me to catch the scent of her perfume. "You must be the mysterious husband we never see." Mysterious. An interesting choice of words. "She talks about me?" I asked. Jessica's smile widened. "Oh, she talks about you. Though lately it's been more about how busy you are, how focused on work, how you two are like ships passing in the night." Ships passing in the night. My wife had been discussing our marriage with her coworkers, specifically how distant we'd become. "Well," I said, taking a sip of my drink, "tonight I'm not busy at all." Jessica leaned against the bar, her gaze on me holding an expression decidedly inappropriate for casual conversation with a married man. "No," she said, her voice dropping slightly, "tonight you're not." Across the room, I caught my wife glancing in our direction. For the first time all evening, Her eyes met mine directly. They flickered from my face to Jessica, then back to me. Something crossed her expression, too fleeting to decipher. Then she turned back to her conversation as if nothing had happened. Jessica noticed, too. "Interesting," she murmured, moving even closer. "Very interesting." Jessica ordered another round of drinks, without asking if I wanted one. She had a way of taking charge that reminded me of my wife when we first met. Direct, confident, present. "So, tell me about this promotion," she said, turning her full attention to me. "Your wife mentioned you've been working crazy hours." "Regional manager," I said. "Just found out today, actually today." Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "And you're here at a party instead of celebrating? That's either very dedicated or very stupid." I laughed despite myself. Jury's still out on that one. "Well, congratulations." She raised her glass and clinked it against mine. "To men who actually accomplish things." There was something pointed in her delivery, a subtle comparison. We talked for the next 20 minutes. Real conversation. She asked follow-up questions, remembered details, and made me laugh twice. It felt strange to be the focus of someone's attention after spending the evening being treated like furniture. "You know," Jessica said, glancing around the room, "I used to be married to someone who ignored me at parties too." Used to be. She took a long sip of her drink. Divorce was the best decision I ever made. Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. I was about to respond when someone bumped into me from behind, hard enough to spill some of my drink. "Oh, sorry," my wife said, but her gaze wasn't on me. She was staring at Jessica with an expression I'd never seen. "Jessica, I didn't know you two had met." "Your husband is charming," Jessica said smoothly. "We've been having the most interesting conversation about ambition and appreciation." My wife's grip tightened on her wine glass. "That's nice, honey. Can I talk to you for a second?" "Actually," Jessica interjected before I could answer, "I was just about to steal him for a dance. They're playing something slow, and I hate dancing alone." She didn't wait for permission. Jessica took my hand and led me toward the small dance floor where a few other couples swayed to a jazz standard I didn't recognize. "Is this a good idea?" I asked as she put her arms around my neck. "Probably not," she said, pulling me closer. "But your wife has been watching us for the last 5 minutes, and she looks absolutely miserable." I glanced over Jessica's shoulder. My wife was standing exactly where we'd left her, wine glass in hand, watching us with an expression somewhere between shock and fury. "She's not used to sharing attention," Jessica continued, her breath warm against my ear. "Especially not yours." "How do you know all this?" Jessica pulled back slightly, looking at me with those calculating eyes. "Because she talks about you constantly. How you work too much. How you don't notice her anymore. How you two barely talk." She paused. "How she's not sure if you still find her attractive." The music shifted to something even slower. Jessica moved closer, close enough that anyone watching would think we were more than just dance partners. "The thing is," she whispered, her lips almost touching my ear, "I think the problem isn't that you don't notice her. I think the problem is that she's gotten too comfortable being ignored. Some women need to be reminded that their husbands are still men. Other women want." That's when she said it, loud enough that the couple dancing next to us could hear. Loud enough that anyone standing at the edge of the dance floor would catch it. "You're mine tonight." The words hit like a slap, not because they were inappropriate, but because of how they sounded. Possessive, confident, final. I looked over Jessica's shoulder again. My wife wasn't just watching anymore. She was moving toward us, cutting through the crowd with a determination that signaled a very bad night for someone. Jessica felt me tense up and smiled. "Here she comes," she murmured. "Right on schedule." "This is going to cause problems," I said. "Good," Jessica replied. "Problems wake people up." My wife reached the edge of the dance floor just as the song ended. Her face was flushed, whether from wine or anger I couldn't tell. "The song's over," she announced, loud enough for several people to turn and look. Jessica slowly let go of me, but didn't step back. "You're right. Thank you for the dance." She looked directly at my wife. "He's a wonderful dancer, among other things, I'm sure." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. "We should probably go," my wife said to me, but her eyes never left Jessica. "Should we?" I asked. I was actually having a good time. Something flickered across my wife's face, something that looked suspiciously like panic. My wife stood there for a moment, clearly expecting me to follow her lead, as I always did. When I didn't move, her expression shifted from confident to confused. "Actually," I said, "I think I'll grab another drink first." Jessica's smile was pure satisfaction. "Great idea. I'll join you." We walked back to the bar together, leaving my wife standing alone on the edge of the dance floor. I could feel her watching us, but for the first time in months, I didn't care. "2 whiskeys," Jessica told the bartender. "Make them doubles." "I didn't order whiskey," I said. "Trust me, you're going to need it." She turned to face the room, leaning against the bar with her elbow. "Your wife is talking to that brunette from accounting, the one who looks like she just swallowed a lemon." I glanced over. My wife was indeed in an intense conversation with someone I didn't recognize. Both of them were shooting looks in our direction. "Let me guess," Jessica continued. "She's asking for backup, trying to figure out if you've lost your mind or if I'm just that irresistible." The bartender set our drinks down. Jessica picked up both glasses and handed me one. "To new experiences," she said, raising her glass. "To surviving the night," I countered. She laughed and touched her glass to mine. "Oh, you'll survive. The question is whether your marriage will." It was a loaded statement, and we both knew it. I took a long sip of whiskey and studied her face. "You're enjoying this," I said. "Absolutely." She didn't even pretend otherwise. "Your wife has spent 2 years complaining about how predictable you are, how you never surprise her, how you just work and come home and watch television." She said that. She said a lot of things. Jessica moved closer, her hand finding my arm again. "She said you haven't taken her out in months, that you don't notice when she gets her hair done, that you two have conversations about bills and schedules, but never about anything that matters." Each observation hit like a physical blow because they were all true. When had I stopped noticing her hair? When had our conversations become purely functional? "But here's what she never mentioned," Jessica continued, her fingers tracing a small circle on my forearm. "How good you look in a suit. How you actually listen when someone talks to you. How you have this quiet confidence that most men fake, but you actually possess." I felt something shift in my chest. Not guilt or confusion, but something sharper, clarity. "She also never mentioned," Jessica said, leaning close enough that her perfume was intoxicating, "how you smell, or how you have these little lines around your eyes when you smile, or how your voice gets lower when you're really paying attention to someone." Across the room, my wife was now standing with 3 other women, all of them watching our conversation with varying degrees of shock and fascination. "They're having quite the discussion over there," Jessica observed, following my gaze. "About what?" "About whether I'm making a move on you or whether you're encouraging it." She took another sip of whiskey. "The truth is it doesn't matter. What matters is that your wife is finally seeing you as a man other women want instead of just a husband who pays bills." That's when my wife started walking over. Not the casual approach from before, but a march. Determined. Territorial. "Here we go," Jessica murmured. My wife reached us just as Jessica was saying something about how some men know how to make a woman feel appreciated. Perfect timing. "Jessica, can I borrow my husband for a minute?" The emphasis on my husband was impossible to miss. "Of course," Jessica said sweetly, "but don't keep him too long. We were just getting to the interesting part of our conversation." My wife grabbed my arm and pulled me aside toward a quieter corner near the hotel's lobby entrance. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed. "Having a conversation," I said calmly. "Something we used to do." "She's flirting with you." "Obviously." "Is she?" I took another sip of whiskey. I hadn't noticed. The lie was so obvious that my wife's eyes widened. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious." I looked at her directly. "Tell me, when's the last time you flirted with me?" The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "When's the last time you touched my arm while we were talking, or laughed at something I said, or looked at me the way you look at your coworkers?" "That's different," she said, but her voice was weaker now. "Different how?" She couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. She'd been treating me like a roommate for months while giving her best energy to everyone else. "I want to go home," she said finally. "I don't," I said. "Excuse me." "I don't want to go home. I'm having a good time." "Because some woman is throwing herself at you?" I stepped closer, close enough that she had to look up to meet my eyes. "No, because someone is actually interested in what I have to say." My wife's face went through several emotions in the span of 10 seconds. Shock, anger, something that might have been hurt, and finally desperation. "Fine," she said, her voice getting louder. "If you want to stay and make a fool of yourself, go ahead." She turned to walk away, but I could tell she expected me to follow. When I didn't, she stopped and looked back. "Are you coming or not?" "Not." The word hung in the air between us. Other people were starting to notice the tension. Conversations were getting quieter. Heads were turning. That's when she made her first real mistake of the evening. "You know what?" she said, loud enough for the people around us to hear. "Maybe I should have come alone. At least, then, I wouldn't have to babysit you all night." Babysit? In front of her colleagues. In front of people I had just met. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something calmer and more dangerous. "Babysit," I repeated, my voice perfectly level. Interesting choice of words. Jessica appeared beside us, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Everything okay over here?" "Perfect," I said, not taking my eyes off my wife. My wife was just explaining how exhausting it is to babysit me. "Oh," Jessica said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "How awful for you, having a husband who got promoted today and wanted to celebrate with his wife." My wife's eyes snapped to Jessica. "Stay out of this." "Actually," Jessica continued, ignoring the warning, "he told me about the promotion. Regional manager. Quite impressive. You must be so proud." The silence that followed was deafening, because everyone could see what Jessica had just exposed. My wife didn't know about the promotion. Her own husband had gotten promoted, and she didn't know. "You didn't tell her?" Jessica asked, turning to me with perfectly feigned surprise. "About your big news?" "I tried," I said simply, but apparently it wasn't as important as her curling iron. Several people were openly watching now. The conversation had crossed the line from private disagreement to public spectacle. My wife's face was turning red. "We can discuss this at home." "Can we?" I asked. "When exactly?" "Between your work calls and your hair appointments and your girls' nights out." "Don't," she said, but her voice was shaking now. Jessica stepped closer to me, her hand finding my arm again. "Some women don't appreciate what they have," she said, loud enough for the growing audience to hear. "Lucky for the rest of us." That's when my wife snapped. "Get your hands off my husband." "Your husband?" Jessica's smile was razor sharp. "The same husband you've been complaining about for months? The one who apparently works too much and doesn't pay enough attention to you." The crowd around us had grown larger. I could see people from my wife's department watching with fascination and horror. "I never said that." My wife protested, but her voice was weak. "Really?" Jessica tilted her head. Because I distinctly remember you saying how he never surprises you anymore. How he's become predictable. How you sometimes wonder if you married the wrong person. Each word hit like a slap, not because Jessica was lying, but because she clearly wasn't. My wife looked around at the faces watching us, realizing that her private conversations were now public knowledge. That's not. I didn't mean. Oh, but you did mean it, I said, my voice cutting through her stammering. The question is, did you mean for everyone here to know about it? This is ridiculous, my wife said, but she was backing away now, trying to escape the circle of observers. What's ridiculous, I said, following her, is spending the evening watching you flirt with every man in this room while treating me like an embarrassment. I wasn't flirting with anyone. Right. I turned to address the crowd that had gathered. Show of hands, who here saw my wife flirting with the guys from sales? 3 hands went up, then 5, then more. My wife looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. And how many of you have heard her complain about her boring husband who doesn't appreciate her? More hands. Uncomfortable shifting. Someone actually laughed. Jessica moved even closer to me, her body language making a statement that everyone could read. Well, she said, her voice carrying across the now silent crowd. I think he's absolutely fascinating. My wife looked from Jessica to me to the sea of faces watching our marriage implode in real time. I want to leave, she whispered. Now. Then leave, I said calmly. But I'm staying. You can't be serious. I pulled out my phone and handed it to Jessica. Would you mind putting your number in here? I'd hate to lose touch. Jessica took the phone with a smile that could have powered the hotel. My pleasure. The sound of her typing was the only noise in the room. When she handed the phone back, she made sure her fingers lingered on mine. Text me, she said. Anytime. My wife made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Then she turned and ran toward the exit, pushing through the crowd of her coworkers. I watched her go, then turned back to Jessica and the assembled audience. Well, I said, raising my whiskey glass. This turned out to be a much better party than I expected. I stayed at the party for another hour, not because I was having the time of my life, but because leaving immediately would have looked like I was chasing after her, and I wasn't. Jessica introduced me to half a dozen people who apparently knew more about my wife's opinions on our marriage than I did. Fascinating conversations, really. Turns out I was predictable, emotionally distant, and apparently had the romantic instincts of a houseplant. She really said all that? I asked Jessica as we shared a cigarette outside the hotel. And more. Jessica blew smoke into the night air. The girl talks like she's trapped in some loveless arrangement instead of married to a successful man who clearly adores her. Adored, I corrected. Past tense. Present tense, Jessica said, studying my face. You wouldn't be this hurt if you didn't still care. She was right, but I wasn't about to admit it. My phone buzzed. Text message from my wife. Where are you? Are you coming home? I showed Jessica the screen. What do you think? I think, Jessica said, taking the phone from my hands, that she needs to learn what uncertainty feels like. She typed something and handed the phone back. The message read, eventually. That's cruel, I said. That's strategic. Jessica dropped her cigarette and stepped on it. She's been taking you for granted because she thought you'd always be there. Now she's not sure. My phone buzzed again. What does that mean? Talk to me. Jessica typed another response later. You're enjoying this too much, I told her. Someone should. She moved closer, her hand finding my chest. Your wife spent 2 years complaining about how boring you are. Meanwhile, you're the most interesting man at this party because you finally grew a spine. We stood there in the cool night air, and I had to admit she was right. For the first time in months, I felt awake, alert, present. I should go home, I said. Should you? Jessica's hand moved to my tie, straightening it. Or should you make her wait a little longer? My phone buzzed again. Please call me. I'm worried. This time I typed the response myself, don't be. I'm fine. The drive home took 20 minutes. 20 minutes to think about everything that had just happened. 20 minutes to decide what kind of man I was going to be. When I walked through that door, I found her sitting on the couch in the dark, still wearing the black dress, makeup smeared from crying. Where were you? She asked before I'd even closed the door. At the party, you know, the one you abandoned me at. I didn't abandon you. You chose to stay. Right. I chose to stay and talk to people who actually find me interesting. I hung my jacket on the chair and loosened my tie. Amazing how that works. She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. Can we talk about this? Talk about what? About how I'm unpredictable. About how you wonder if you married the wrong person. About how you've been sharing the intimate details of our marriage with your coworkers. Jessica was lying. Was she? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. Because I have her number now. I could call and ask for specifics. The threat hit exactly as intended. My wife's face went white. You got her number? She gave it to me, very enthusiastically. I sat down in the chair across from the couch, putting distance between us. Interesting woman. Very attentive. Great listener. You're trying to hurt me. No, I said calmly. I'm trying to understand something. Help me out here. When exactly did I become the enemy? She sat back down, pulling a throw pillow into her lap like armor. You're not the enemy. Then why do you talk about me like I am? I don't. Really? Because according to Jessica, and apparently half your office, I'm a workaholic who ignores you and fails to appreciate the amazing woman I married. I was venting. Everyone vents about their spouse sometimes. Venting is saying, I leave dishes in the sink. What you did was character assassination. My phone buzzed. Text from Jessica. How's the homecoming going? I read it and smiled slightly, just enough for my wife to notice. Who is that? She asked. Jessica, checking to make sure I made it home safely. Delete her number. The demand hung in the air between us. Direct, desperate, exactly the kind of ultimatum that would have worked on the old version of me. No, I said simply. Excuse me. No, I'm not deleting anything. I'm not apologizing for having a conversation with an attractive woman who actually enjoys my company. And I'm certainly not pretending tonight didn't happen. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. What's gotten into you? Clarity. I stood up and headed toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. You can sleep on the couch if you want to keep having this conversation. We're not done talking. I paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her. Actually, we are. We're done talking until you figure out whether you want to be married to me or just complain about being married to me. That's not fair. Fair. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair would have been you asking about my promotion. Fair would have been you introducing me to people tonight instead of hiding me in corners. Fair would have been you not sharing our private business with anyone who will listen. I started up the stairs, then stopped. Oh, and just so we're clear, the next time you want to ignore me at a party, don't be surprised when someone else decides to pay attention. I woke up Saturday morning to the smell of bacon and coffee. A real breakfast, not the usual granola bar she grabbed on her way out the door. When I came downstairs, she was standing at the stove, wearing the blue dress I bought her for our anniversary, the one she claimed was too fancy for every day. Good morning, she said, her voice careful and measured. I made your favorite eggs Benedict. She hadn't made eggs Benedict in over a year. Thanks, I said, pouring myself coffee. What's the occasion? Can't I make breakfast for my husband? You can. You just usually don't. The words hit harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. She deserved to sit with the truth for a while. My phone buzzed on the counter. Text from Jessica. Good morning, handsome. Sleep well. My wife glanced at the phone, then at me. Are you going to answer that? Probably. I picked up the phone and typed back, like a baby. Thanks for last night. What are you doing? My wife asked, her voice getting higher. What are you doing? Having a conversation. You know, that thing people do when they enjoy each other's company. She turned off the stove and faced me fully. I know I messed up last night. I know I've been distant lately, but this isn't the way to handle it. What would you suggest? More couples therapy? More promises to do better? More conversations about how we need to communicate more? Maybe. We tried that route. 6 months of therapy where you nodded along and agreed to try harder, then went right back to treating me like background noise. She served the eggs Benedict on the good china, the plates we usually saved for holidays. Everything about the morning felt performative, like she was playing the role of attentive wife. I want to fix this, she said, sitting across from me at the table. Fix what exactly? Our marriage. Us. There is no us to fix. There's you living your life and me funding it. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered it immediately, making sure she could see Jessica's name on the screen. She's persistent, my wife observed. She's interested. There's a difference. For the next hour, my wife tried everything. She asked about work, complimented my haircut, suggested we plan a weekend getaway. All the attention I'd been craving for months, suddenly available now that she felt threatened. This is ridiculous, she said finally. You're punishing me because some woman flirted with you at a party. I'm not punishing you. I'm just not pretending anymore. Pretending what? That this marriage is working. That you respect me. That you see me as anything other than a reliable paycheck with a decent health insurance plan. She started crying then. Real tears. Not the manipulative kind she used when she wanted something. I do love you, she said. I know I haven't been showing it, but I do. Love isn't enough anymore. I need respect. I need to feel like you actually enjoy being around me. I do enjoy being around you. When? When's the last time you laughed at something I said? When's the last time you asked about my day and actually listened to the answer? When's the last time you looked at me the way you looked at those guys from sales last night? She couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. My phone rang. Jessica, again. Don't answer it. My wife pleaded. I looked at her tear-streaked face, then at the phone. Why not? Because you're my husband. Then act like I'm your husband. Not your roommate, not your financial advisor, not your convenient +1 for work events. I answered the call. Good morning, Jessica. Good morning yourself. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. My wife was watching me with the kind of desperate attention she used to reserve for her favorite TV shows. Not at all. Just having breakfast. Wonderful. I was calling to see if you'd like to meet for coffee this afternoon. There's this little place downtown that makes the most amazing lattes. I looked directly at my wife as I answered. I'd love to. Perfect. 2 o'clock at Grind Coffee on 5th Street. I'll be there. Excellent. I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation from last night. I hung up and set the phone on the table between us. Coffee date? My wife asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Apparently. You can't be serious. Dead serious. You wanted me to be less predictable. Congratulations. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. If you walk out that door to meet her, don't bother coming back. I stood up too, calmly finishing my coffee. Ultimatums don't work on me anymore. If you want me to stay, give me a reason that doesn't involve threats or guilt. I'm your wife. Then be my wife. Don't just claim the title. I headed toward the door, grabbing my keys from the hook. Where are you going? It's only 10 in the morning. For a drive. Maybe I'll stop by the office and clean out my old desk. Maybe I'll go look at apartments. Maybe I'll just drive around and think about what I want my life to look like. Apartments. Well, you did tell me not to come back. The panic in her eyes was immediate and total. I didn't mean that. Sure you did. You just didn't think I'd call your bluff. I opened the door and paused. Here's the thing you need to understand. The man who would have begged for your attention, who would have apologized for your mistakes, who would have accepted scraps of affection and called it love, he's gone. What you're dealing with now is someone who knows his worth. And what's that supposed to mean? I smiled, but it wasn't warm. It means the next move is yours. Choose wisely.